What's going on, guys? MariK here, back with episode 3 of our History of the Dragon Ball Super card game mini-series. In between sets 2 and 3, Bandai gave us a little bit of extra product to kind of satiate us, to hold us over until the release of the third set, in the form of a draft box, which was kind of pretty terrible compared to the new draft box we have coming up. But at the very least, it was a few extra cards, and then we had 2 expansions that also came out a little later and still before set 3. So these leaders and even the expansions had a huge impact on the game, completely warped the meta as we knew it in set 2 and even more so in set 3. The draft boxes came with 4 new leaders and 12 packs of set 1, 12 packs of set 2, so it's an easy way to kind of try and get those Sensu Beans and other cards from set 1 that you might have missed. More importantly, though, were the new leaders that the draft box provided us. The first one was Vile Strike Dark Prince Vegeta. Everybody loves Majin Vegeta, whether you're a big-time Vegeta fan, or even just a kind of don't care for him, but he's kind of there fan. Majin Vegeta was one of the best iterations of the character, albeit he was kind of just an arrogant, POS as well. This leader was interesting in the fact that it gave us another critical leader similar to the Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta that we got in set 1. However, instead of taking a card from your life, you discarded a card from your hand to give him critical, but he also gained an additional 5,000 power. The difference between the way this one played and the set 1 Vegeta played is that allowed you to awaken earlier. This leader, however, kind of provided a different kind of strategy by lowering the amount of cards in your hand. So other cards that came out in, say, set 1 and 2 that said, if you have X amount of cards in your hand, you can do this. This not only allowed you to especially benefit from a lot of the red cards in set 2. You had the Ultimate Gohan that became a 2-drop if you had 4 or less cards in your hand. You had the Super Saiyan 3 Gotenks that gave all of his tokens double strike if you had 4 or less cards in your hand. You had the Vegito Dash Pack card that gained 10,000 power and drew 2 cards if you had 4 or less in your hand. There was just so many cards that you could use to take advantage of his ability. And even so, even after his release, there were still other cards that came out that had similar effects. One of the biggest ones was the Tournament Pack, I believe Tournament Pack 4 Gohan, that he had critical, and if you were at 4 or less, you drew 2 cards as well. And so there was just a lot of ways you could play this leader. He wasn't the best by far, but he definitely had an interesting take on the game, and being able to swing at your opponent with an increased critical hit every turn is just, it's nothing to shake your head at, that's for sure. I liked this leader, and by far it has one of the coolest leader arts in the entire game. The second draft box leader was Awakened Strike Super Saiyan Blue Sun Goku. This card was kind of like the polar opposite of the Vile Strike Vegeta, but it was also kind of like a counterpart to the Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta leader from set 1. Whereas that leader, you took a card from your life and added it to your hand to give him critical, the Goku leader gave you double strike instead. However, he also had another added bonus on the Awakened side, where if you had 7 or more energy, he gained 5,000 power. Now, the 7 or more energy kind of wasn't as relevant because at the time, the game was kind of speeding up a little bit, with the exception of the Blue-Green Soul Striker deck, in which case you obviously couldn't run this leader anyways because you were running Soul Striker. So while this leader was cool, his abilities were certainly interesting, he didn't really have a whole lot of place. And more people were going to choose to run the Vegeta for critical than they were to run this Goku for double strike. And if you're running a blue leader in general, there were just far better blue leaders at the time between Trunks and Soul Striker and the Vegeta as far as blue generic leaders. So the Goku just kind of just set aside. He was cool to have, the art was dope, he was nice for a collection, but overall he didn't have a huge impact on the game. Then for green, we had one of my favorite leaders, Prodigious Strike Super Saiyan Gotenks. This leader didn't exactly fit the Gotenks theme, but it did fit the theme of green, which was hand destruction. When you attacked a leader card, if you had less cards in your hand, your opponent had to discard a card. The downside of that is you have to have less cards in your hand. which your opponent could try and play around, but also it meant that for you to guarantee you were going to have the skill trigger, you had to make sure you had less cards. Sometimes that meant just comboing needlessly just to waste cards. This leader, it saw a good bit of play, and I've even done some deck profiles with this leader where we've built various things just to kind of have fun with it and to use the discard ability. But the leader didn't really show a whole lot of promise because there wasn't really a lot of support for him. And again, you could run green, but green was one of those colors that unless you were running Cell and Androids at the time, it was just severely overshadowed by other colors. I personally loved this leader, and when we started getting more support for Gotenks, it was fun to have kind of like a Gotenks theme deck with the leader, but again, the leader just didn't really have any synergy with any of the Gotenks cards we had. In a way, I mean, with the red Gotenks from Union Force, you did want to have less than 4 cards, or 4 or less cards, so you could get the double strike and the tokens, which kind of fueled the leader's ability, but not enough to really take advantage of that. And making your opponent discard a card was kind of nice, but I feel like there was more synergy for that kind of ability to use, like Vile Strike Vegeta, or even the Soul Unleashed Goku from Set 2. I would absolutely love it if we got a Gotenks leader, preferably blue, because blue seems to be the color I play the most. But I'll even take red, just because it goes with some of the other stuff. Actually, it would go great with the the Mighty Mass Super Combo, but that's for another time. The final leader is easily the most controversial leader. It was the Bionic Strike Mecha Frieza. When this leader first came out, he was considered good, but he wasn't considered anything that was too ridiculous. There wasn't a whole lot that you could really abuse with him. So while some people did play Bionic Strike, a lot of people were still playing Cell, or they were playing Androids, or Soul Striker. Other decks were just, the leader's abilities were just better. The awesome thing about this Frieza, though, was that basically anytime you were going to activate an extra card, you could add a card from your life to your hand and lower that card's cost by 1. So if it was 1 cost, you would just crit yourself for 1 and then play the card for free. This allowed you to do some crazy, stupid stuff. But again, the leader didn't really take off during Set 2. Now, it came out after Set 2, but it wasn't until Set 3 that this leader actually became extremely volatile. And the Awakened side, you reduced the card's cost by 2, which was even just more insane, and allowed for so many crazy plays. But it wasn't until people started running Mecha Frieza with Great Apes from Crossworlds that this deck became cancerous almost, to the point that everybody was complaining about it. And if they weren't complaining about it, they were playing the deck. Kind of made me sad because I loved playing Great Apes, because I love Bardock. Bardock's one of my favorite characters. It was one of my favorite movies. And then people ruined it with Frieza. The deck was not unbeatable, though. There were instances where you could easily beat it. I beat it with Majin Buu from Set 3. I also beat it with Bardock Great Apes, where I ran the Bardock leader instead of Mecha Frieza. But this leader was so controversial that eventually Bandai ended up errataing the card, rendering it virtually unplayable. It was still usable, but the part that made it desirable to run had been greatly diminished, and so Mecha Frieza had a decent run near the end of Set 2, all the way through almost to Set 3, but once Bionic Frieza was gone, people quickly found another card, another leader to abuse, and it became kind of the same thing where everybody was running that one leader. But needless to say, being able to play extra cards for free, most notably Crusher Ball and Cold Bloodlust, were easily 2 of the biggest plays you could make with this leader, and one of the best reasons to take advantage of its power. About a month after the release of the draft boxes, people had kind of gotten comfortable with what they were playing when Bandai decided to drop on us the first 2 expansions for the card game in the Heroes and Villains expansions. The Heroes focused on blue and green, And the Villains expansion focused on the new black cards, the new Overrealm cards. People weren't familiar with them unless they had, previous TCG interaction. Some people, especially people from Yu-Gi-Oh, were able to adapt pretty quickly with it because you had cards that already removed cards from play from the graveyard, and were able to kind of adapt to that playstyle pretty quickly. The blue-green heroes didn't get as much attention as the black villains cards did, but the blue-green heroes, I feel like they still had a good number of good cards to them, and even though they were overshadowed by the new Overrealm support, they still had their places in certain decks. The blue cards were the ones I was excited for from the Heroes expansion, most notably the Vegito and the Trunks. However, the Goku and the Vegeta ended up being the better cards to play. The Goku being a 3-drop, you could play him early on, and he could fetch out any Vegeta and 3 or less and be able to play it in rest mode. So it helped set up for your Vegito plays pretty easily. And there were several good targets for that. Obviously, the Comrades combined Vegeta worked well for that. You also had there was 2 3-drop Vegetas from set 1. One of them was a vanilla 20,000, and the other one was a 15,000 with critical. So you had a good set of options, and you've got even better options now for Comrades combined in the Majin Vegeta from set 6. You've got the Deadly Defender from set 5. There's just so many good options for that card, and I feel like the Comrades combined, at least the Goku, is still severely underrated. The Vegeta, on the other hand, you could play him for 1 less if all your energy was blue, so you just became a 2-cost 20,000, which by standards now is absolutely meaningless. But at the time, it wasn't too bad. I actually used both of those cards in my mono blue Vegito deck for the longest, and that's when I was kicking ass with that deck. That's what we were using because you got him out so quickly, and all you had to do was play the Goku, get the Vegeta out, keep him alive for a turn. The next turn you had your materials to Potara with. The Vegito, on the other hand, was nice. I did like its ability, but I still preferred to run the Tournament Pack Bursting Energy Vegito. This Vegito was great, though, in the fact that he was basically triple strike crit. He had dual attack, and he had critical, and so he got to attack twice, and then if you attacked with him, then you got double strike in the second attack. So, 3 instances of crit damage that your opponent wasn't going to get, that they'd have to stop. He's a 30,000 power. I honestly kind of liked this Vegito better than I liked Repeated Force. While Repeated Force was nice because he got like stupid large, this one, again, like crit is just such a great ability. Now, if you got your opponent to 3 life, the crit doesn't matter because the triple strike's going to kill him regardless. But, I don't know, it just felt like Repeated Force was lacking in an additional ability, whereas the Bursting Energy gave you energy back, and Vegito the Savior gave you crit and gave you dual attack. So you could attack the first time, KO a battle card, and then do double strike crit with a second attack as well. The Trunks, on the other hand, he fetched out a Vegito card, so he was good for Vegito decks, but I didn't like running him in Vegito decks. I actually preferred to just run him in my future Trunks deck. You could search him out with Bulma, you could search him out with the Time Machine, and he was a 15k with critical. So his ability to search out the Vegito was nice, but it was more the fact that he was a cheap crit card that you could play that just complemented the Trunks deck so well. The green cards focused around the new Gotenks, which I loved this Gotenks. His abilities were great. I didn't care so much for the Goten and the Trunks. It did kind of work well with a Gotenks themed deck. There was enough synergy at the time. It would work out better now, since we have so many cards to search the pair of them out, but the United Spirit, Goten and Trunks, they basically searched each other out. Or rather, Goten searched out the Trunks. The Trunks just, decided to KO shit. So you always wanted to play the Goten, get the Trunks, and then you could use them for the Gotenks' ability. Now, they also had the Activate main to where you could play them, get their ability, and then bounce them back to the hand. The Gotenks is where it got really crazy, though, because for 4 energy, you got a 25,000 double striker that drew 2 cards and KO'd a battle card. The only requirements was you had to have a Goten in the drop for one, and you had to have Trunks in the drop for the other. But if you were playing them via the Union Fusion, you were going to have both of them in the drop every single time. So getting essentially a +3, well, rather it's a +1, I guess. When it comes down to it. But the Gotenks was just such a powerful card. It didn't see a whole lot of play, which is upsetting because I really like Gotenks as a character, but there wasn't a whole lot of synergy, and there's not really a good leader that went along with him, as there was with other decks. But he did see a good amount of play around our area for at least a little while. The Dark Demon Realm Villains box was basically the precursor to what we were getting with Set 3 with the Overrealm block. We got a lot more support, but this expansion set, and this one sold out quick, and a couple of cards in the set became really expensive really fast. The most notable one being Time Patrol Trunks. Foils got up to about, believe like $20, and the non-foils weren't too far behind that, not even like $4 or $5 behind that, maybe like $16-17 a pop. Being a free Overrealm card, you just had to have 3 in your drop area. It didn't cost any energy, and you got a free +1, but you got to choose which of the top 2 cards of your deck you wanted. And then you had the option to place the other one on the top or bottom of your deck, so if it's something you didn't want to see your ass, put it at the bottom. If it's something you were like, ooh, a super combo, I want that, I'm going to leave it right here on the deck, and then I'm going to draw it next turn. Easily the best card out of either of the expansion sets, the most played of them, and Time Patrol Trunks stuck around for a while, at least into Set 3, and I believe into Set 4 as well, up until Overrealm kind of took an interesting turn. But then you also had other cards like the Majin Twins, Haru Haru, and Shun Shun. Shun Shun was just like a 5k blocker, and Haru Haru just gains 5k when you attack with it. And then depending on what color your leader was, you could mill the top 2 cards of your deck. So it was kind of like prequel Overrealm support, but overall they never really saw play. The Supreme Kai at Time didn't really see a lot of play either, but her ability was at least somewhat beneficial. You could choose a card, remove it from play, and then during your next turn you got to add that card to your hand. So it was kind of like a gold sarcophagus from Yu-Gi-Oh! But playing her for 2 energy, to me, never seemed worth it. And it must have been the same with everyone else as well, because she just didn't see a lot of play. The rest of the attention went into the other 3 cards from the Villains box. The most notable one had to be the Master Saiyan, the Mysterious Warrior. 1 energy, you get to KO battle cards up to energy cost of 5, and he's got double strike, so he had a reason to not only come out, but to blow shit up and then get some good damage in. This was one of the cards that, for me, Time Patrol Trunks was main decked in every single deck. Master Saiyan, on the other hand, was in every side deck if it wasn't in the main deck. For me, I felt like Time Patrol Trunks, you either main decked it or you didn't. Whereas the Master Saiyan, if you didn't need it, it was good to have in the side deck, but it wasn't something that was detrimental to have in the main deck. It was a great card for board removal. Obviously, if you ran cards like Father Son Kamehameha, or if you ran the Cell Leader, sometimes you just didn't need that removal because it was already there. But Master Saiyan was one of the best cards. It's another reason why it, along with Time Patrol Trunks, was part of the event pack. Then we had Time Ruler Toa. This was the first Toa card we got, which at the time of release, I wasn't really knowledgeable on Xenoverse, so I didn't really know what the allure was of the character. But her card's really cool. When you overwhelmed her, you get to take one of your opponent's battle cards. It was only energy cost of 2 or less, but you literally got to take it, and you could just keep it. Like, it was yours. It wasn't like you took it for the turn, and then you gave it back. Nah, it was yours. You finders keepers. And she was a big fan of the dibs rule. On the other hand, you had Mira from the Darkness, who was a 20,000 that gained critical when you played him with Overrealm, which we've talked about before, how critical crit is. I know, that's terrible. But it's such a detrimental skill, and being able to just, for free, for no energy, get out a 20k that had crit, like that's not a bad card. By far, that was not a bad card, especially at the time when that's all we had. So you had, your options were an Overrealm that had crit, an Overrealm that took their little guys, an Overrealm that killed their little guys, or an Overrealm that gave you a little bit extra card advantage. All of them were fantastic options. Obviously, Trunks and then the Masked Saiyan were the ones that were used the most often, but Toei and Mira did see a decent bit of play as well. They just were overshadowed by the Saiyans, of course, because who isn't when it comes to Dragon Ball? These cards would stick around for a decent while going into the release of Set 3 and even Set 4, where Overrealm really became relevant between like actual archetypes that revolved around it, leaders that benefited from it, and there were just other factors that just allowed you to mill your cards and constantly have Overrealm every single turn of the game. In fact, when Overrealm first came out, there was quite a few people, including myself and a teammate of mine, that thought, let's use the Set 2 cooler leader with Union Force. Not Union Force, with Overrealm. And just run a yellow-black Overrealm deck. So you had the aspect of control with the yellow cards. You had the Overrealm stuff with the Trunks, the Toei, the Mira, the Masked Saiyan. And you had the leader that milled 3 cards every turn. So Toei required 4, Mira required 4, Masked Saiyan required 5, Trunks only required 3, but it was very easy to get those numbers, to be able to play your free battle card every single turn. And it was fun to play. It was nice to actually have a reason to play the cooler leader, but unfortunately, just like the rest of these cards, cooler quickly died out, and Trunks and Masked Saiyan eventually lost their luster as well. Overrealm became one of those things where it started out as something that you had to have in the deck. There was zero reason to not run it at all, and then it eventually became, with the release of the Wish decks and Sparking, to where you had to choose between running Sparking strategies or running the Overrealm strategies. You couldn't run both. I tried it. It was not super consistent, and cards just had to fall into your lap and go in your favor, and that just wasn't the case most of the time. Overall, both the draft box leaders and the expansion packs had a huge impact on the game and the competitive format, and even going into Set 3, they all more or less had an impact on that as well. Most notably, as I said, the Mega Frieza leader, the Gotenks leader did somewhat, and then you had the Time Patrol Trunks and the Overrealm Masked Saiyan, and those cards, along with a few other strategies, just it kept the game fresh, but at the same time made the game stagnant. Like, it gave us extra cards to use, it gave us new strategies to imply, but once word got around, like with the Mecha Frieza deck, everybody was kind of running it, and so some of those strategies kind of fell off, and that's why cards like the Vegito support and the Gotenks support in the expansion sets just kind of fell shy and didn't really get the attention they truly deserved. But that's going to go ahead and do it for this video. If you guys were actually around during this time, it makes a lot more sense to be able to see how drastically the game went between Set 2, between these expansions, and then with Set 3. Obviously, from Set 3 onwards, it wasn't as big of a change to adapt to, just because you had Overrealm in every set after that. But going from having your main decks to throwing Overrealm and everything, and then to having to decide whether or not to run Overrealm or run other things, it was a big change in strategy and a big change in your playstyle as well. But if you guys enjoyed this video, if you guys are enjoying the series, as I know a lot of you have already expressed you have been, make sure you hit that like button down below for us. You know, we appreciate the support, and we appreciate all of our subscribers. I'm glad you guys have been sticking around and enjoying all the content. With that, we're going to go ahead and get the freak out of here, and we'll see you guys in the next episode.